Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel again today. Again, it's the 1st of January 2020. So Happy New Year to you all. I hope you are not suffering with a sore head today. But I have a new share today for Cut to You using the newsletter freebie for the 1st, which is this thank you cut file, which as you can see I've made 6 cards with. So these cards all went to teachers and teachers' aides at the end of the school year last year for both of my boys' teachers and teachers' aides. And I really loved how they came out. I have cut them on textured white cardstock, and then I have gone back in to the software and had my Cameo cut all the pieces to fill in these letters. I'm just using papers from my scrap box because I can, and I really want to use more of what I have. So this made it super easy for me to back them. They are all backed now, I think, by the look of that on the right hand side. And so I'm using these Charms Creations. There's 2 hearts and a star. And I've kind of matched the papers to the colours in the Charms Creations that I'm using for these ones. I'm working on white cardstock, I think, and I have got another piece of paper here just to test the colours that I want to play with. I want to do a light wash of colour in the background, and so like you can see I'm just trying to match colours here. This orange one is Orange Sherbet Shimmers, and you can see I'm just watering that down a bit, and I'm just going in with a paintbrush and adding a really quick layer of watercolour paint to the background here, going back in with a bit more water just to get that colour to move. I didn't want really bold colours. I'm going to pop that one aside to dry, sped this up a bit, and you can see that's the kind of look that I'm going for. This next colour that I'm using is Colder Than Ice, and again I'm just testing that colour to make sure I've got the right colour. I'm going to work on my cardstock base again. Went in with some water to start with and then more of that colour. Dry that off with my heat tool, make sure I'm good with that. And then this last one I'm going to use Shimmers in Pink. So I'm doing the exact same thing again. First I'm going to test my colour on that piece of cardstock I've got there. I'm like, yep, that's perfect. Just dab it up a bit. No, actually it wasn't perfect, it was a bit too bold, so I've just dabbed that up. And you can see here I'm adding more water with this one because I wanted that lighter colour. Dry that off. I'm really happy with how that's looking, but I want to add a bit more to the background. So I'm going to work in a set of 3 here. I have got a Stampin' Up! Stamp set here. I'm going to go in first, I think, with grey ink. Yeah, so grey archival ink. I wasn't sure if I was going to add more wet media to this or not, so I went the safe way and added archival ink. These cards end up, this grey ends up looking quite silver, and it's really pretty, but I really like the extra that it adds behind those layers there. Just a bit of interest. And so I'm going to essentially do the same thing for all 3 cards. And I'm just turning that stamp so that I get a bit of a different impression each time I stamp it out. I think I do 3 times on each of the cards with this stamp. Oh no, see, look, that's 4. And the same again. And then I'm going to come back in with another stamp from the same set and some black VersaFine, just to add a bit more like to the layers behind. And I just add these bigger splatters, just a couple of them to each of the cards. This VersaFun takes a bit longer to dry, so I'm not stacking these cards on top of each other. Not that it really matters, because if any of the black ink transferred, it would have been onto the back. Happy with how that's looking, and I'm going to come in with some more black splatters. Again, I'm using my India ink and a little paintbrush here. I didn't want big splatters, so I'm just adding a few little ones. I also come in, of course, with some white. Again, that's my white India ink. No, I don't know if I swapped it or if I changed, like if I wasn't using my India ink. This is my Dilutions in white. So I added some machine stitching around the edge of all 3 cards, again in a grey thread, and then I stuck everything down. I did change out one of the hearts to this star. I prefer how that looks. And that is the first 3 cards done. I really love how these turned out. Really happy with them. On to the next ones. So you saw that I had already cut all the pieces on my Cameo to fill the inside pieces of those letters. I wanted to add a little bit of something to behind those layers again, and so I'm going to be embossing some card fronts here. I use hexagon. I actually do 2 of the hexagons, and then I don't use both of them because one of them gets dirty. Just getting my big shot out the way. So this one is like a wood grain pattern, and I don't really know what I was thinking, but I wasn't getting a lot of color coverage here, so I'm going in with this little tool and my Distress Oxide. This is ground espresso, so you can see that some of that texture is starting to be obvious. I really like this one. I think this one might be my favorite of these ones. This one was for a male teacher, so I have tried to make it a little bit more masculine. This next one, I wasn't really sure which color card base I wanted to go with, so I'm just testing those out here. I'm going to come in with Spun Sugar in Distress Oxide. I ink up my brush and then realized that my glass mat is a bit dirty, so I made sure I cleaned it off, and so I'm going to go in and ink that up. And then I was like, man, this is not showing up very well. What am I doing wrong? So I tipped over my ink pad and just started adding the color that way, and I'm like, yes, that's what I need to do. That first one that I started inking with the blending tool, it did pick up some of the brown that obviously I hadn't got it all off the glass mat, so I do emboss another piece of cardstock, but I'll get to that in a minute. I am going around all the edges, and then I'm going back in with the blending brush to soften the edges as well. I love how the wood grain pops off when I run the ink pad over the top like that. Like, yes, I love this. No, it's here that it gets dirty. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to add some of the same to the background, knowing that I had added the brown, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this hasn't cleaned up very well. I have this weird color. So I abandon this. I'm like, nope. And I start again on the next one. And then I'm going to ink around the edges of this with the ink pad the same way I did with the craft one. And then distress all the edges. Now the distress oxides take a little bit longer to dry, so my paper wasn't wet, but it wasn't completely dry either, so I did find that that was a little bit harder. That is okay though. I'm going to pop this onto the yellow because I've got the pineapples on that pattern paper. And here is that card all done. I kind of got carried away with the camera turned off and just completed the card. What I've done though is, you can see here, I'm tearing a couple of pieces of the card front and sticking some pattern paper behind. With the brown one and yellow one, I just added the same pattern paper that I had backed the cut file with. In fact, I do that with all 3. distressing the edges. All three do end up looking a little bit different because of the way that I add the extra details, but they're all very similar. So I'm adding that candy cane stripe to this pink one, and then I realize that I've added glue and distressed the edges and I haven't added ink. Tear that a bit more, add that in there. Make sure that's going to stick down properly, but get rid of the excess glue. I've got these little Swarovski star dangly, they've got a hole in the top, so I'm going to hang those. I've got one for this card and one for the other more feminine card. I'm going to add this crochet twine and then tie that around the O, and it does dangle, and I'm totally fine with that. I really like how these guys look on here. They're really cute. Just add a little bit of something extra. I do not make you watch me muck around with the bow, because I do tie bows in both of them. Taking all the backing off, so I have popped some foam behind that cut file so I can pop that up. Make sure that's reasonably straight, and I can fiddle with that. I'm going to glue the knot onto the O, and then I'm going to leave it to dry and work on the next one. So for this one, I decided to do a little bit different, I think. I think I end up distressing on 4 different edges. So I have run through another piece of a card front with the chevron, obviously, that you can see there. Then I've gone over that pattern with tumbled glass distress oxide. I'm cutting this piece to fit behind the blue. I'm distressing the edges of this. And you can watch. So I start tearing this and distressing it. I do 3 edges, and then I'm like, oh my goodness, this layer is going behind. You ning nong. So funny. But it's all good. In the end, you can't even tell. At this point, I'm like, oh my goodness, you idiot, what are you doing? So I'm like, I'll fix that up. And then if I turn my, no, I didn't turn my card base. I just ripped on different edges on the card front. So I'm just tearing in one place on each side and distressing that up a little bit, rolling it up, and when I apply my glue here, you can't even tell. I'm going to use wet glue all the way around for this one. And then line that up and we're good to go. Can't even tell that I've mucked up. Too funny. That's where the sentiment is going to go. I'm going to add the star here the same way I added the other star. Tape, and I'm pretty sure that I added wet glue to all of these cut files because there is so much texture in the background because of the embossing and because of the ink. I'm going to glue down that knot again. What am I doing? Oh, so I'm assembling the cards now using obviously coloured card bases, folding those in half, and then using wet glue again to stick it all down. And there is going to be a border of this colour all the way around the card front. And I really love how these turned out. All of the teachers seemed happy with them. Our male teacher, I said, I tried really hard to make a more masculine card, and he says, well, cards aren't really masculine anyway, but you did a good job, which cracked me up. So here are my finished cards. I really love how they turned out. Make sure that you are subscribed to the newsletter so that you don't miss out on the next freebie. I will leave links to the description box in the description box below to sign up. I've got photos of all of the cards that I created, so the 2 sets of 3 together and then individuals of all of them. If you have any questions, please make sure you leave them below. Welcome to 2020. I'm really excited for what this year will bring, because surely it is better than last year. I hope that whatever you have done to ring in the new year, you've had a fantastic time and stayed safe, and I will be back again very soon with another share. Have a fantastic day, have some scrappy time, and I will see you again soon.